Grey aliens, what do we know about them? The earliest account of alien abduction was documented in 1957 in Mexico, although it does not refer to grey aliens specifically. Antonio Villas Boas recounted a story of his abduction and subsequent sexual intercourse with a humanoid alien. The alien that allegedly abducted Boas was a humanoid in a grey jumpsuit with small blue eyes. The description of a grey alien that we are familiar with today is of a very thin and light creature with a large, hairless head and remarkably large oval eyes. The nose is almost non-existent and the mouth has a slit that does not appear to have any function. Apparently, grey aliens communicate telepathically with each other. Their arms are long, reaching below the knees, and with 4 delicate fingers of uneven length. Their height is reported to be between 3 and 6 feet. The closest resemblance to this grey alien prototype is found in the account of Betty Hill. This was in 1961, and Betty and her husband Barney Hill were on their way to New Hampshire. They arrived home with a few hours missing from their memories. Subsequently, they began to suffer from insomnia and nightmares during whatever sleep they could manage and had to seek medical help. The story of their abduction emerges from sessions of hypnotic regression that Betty Hill went through. Even though her story is classed with other accounts of alien abduction, Betty insisted that it had been more of a meeting. The aliens that she described were dressed in something resembling military suits. They looked similar to human beings with only slightly larger eyes and bald heads. When shown the typical image of the grey alien as we know them in popular culture, Betty said that was not the aliens she has seen look like. Travis Walton of Arizona, who has allegedly abducted in 1975, describes his captors as having very large, completely bald heads, not at all in proportion to their thin bodies, and with very prominent, somewhat feline eyes. Their fingers were delicate and feel of their body was soft, light and spongy. He also notes that their mouth did not move and yet they seemed to communicate with each other. The description of grey alien that we are familiar with may not conform exactly to what alleged witnesses talk about, but certain things are common in all stories. The aliens could control their victims' minds, and most witnesses remember feeling extremely vulnerable and unable to move on their own when under their influence. The image may be a combination of witness accounts and popular and artist imagination, but the paranormal powers of the grey alien do not appear to be a matter of debate. Similarly, the primary purpose of these abductions seem to be taking blood and tissue samples. In certain cases, victims report invasive examination of their genitals. There are several stories that speak of forced sexual intercourse with aliens as also between captured humans while the aliens stood around and observed. If we are to assume these accounts have some truth in them, then one logical conclusion would be that the grey aliens are interested in humans for some sort of experiment or interspecies reproduction to create a new hybrid race perhaps. This hypothesis is further strengthened by the alleged Dulce firefight incident. Phil Shantier, an engineer who worked for the US government, was in a team that was sent to the Dulce, New Mexico, to carry out some blasting procedures to create top-secret underground constructions. Schneider, in a series of lectures in 1995, recounted that his team chanced upon a large colony of aliens living underground. There was an armed confrontation, and among almost 40 Secret Service agents, FBI personnel, and engineers who faced the aliens, only 3 returned alive. Schneider, one of the survivors, suffered an injury from an alien weapon. However, the more relevant part of his story is where he speaks about a secret treaty between the US government in 1954 during the Eisenhower administration and the aliens. The aliens were, according to Schneider, granted rights to experiment on aliens and some human subjects in exchange of advanced technology that would be given exclusively to the US. These appeared to be grey aliens who later refused to conform to the treaty and began wanton experiment on humans and even used human beings for food. Schneider's story depicts a horrific nightmare of 6 stories of underground construction that includes US government offices, laboratories for experimenting on humans, sections where hybrid creatures that emerge from such experiments are kept, and thousands of humans stored for both experimentation and as food. There is no way to confirm if Schneider was telling the truth since he was found dead under very questionable circumstances in January 1996, 7 months after he publicly recounted his story. All his lecture notes and documents were reported stolen. There are also stories of men in black suits, apparently from the US government agency, visiting people claiming alien abduction or contact and forbidding them to talk publicly about their experience. Conspiracy theorists claim that Roswell was where the aliens first crash landed on Earth, and witnesses did report government agencies removing debris and non-human bodies from the spot. There is also the claim that reverse engineering technology that was found in the crashed spaceship is what helped in creating semiconductors. Fiber optic technology may be another scientific breakthrough with similar origin. There are quite a few theories about grey aliens and their alleged interest in experimenting on humans. According to author Nigel Kerner, the Greys are a race of biologically created robots that cultivated the advanced race of aliens that created them. Now they are looking to harvest human souls to complete themselves. The predominance of violence, corruption, and moral degradation in present-day society he attributes to grey alien manipulation, because we are most vulnerable when we degrade ourselves. Dr. Carla Turner documentation of the rather distressing activities of grey aliens is in support of the theory that they were always the custodian of our race and offered humans as test subjects to other alien species. Apparently, we are something akin to lab rats for the Greys and their alien friends. After Dr. Turner's theory was made public, curiously enough, there appeared quite a few champions of the grey aliens who alleged that the Greys were benevolent creatures who were always looking out for the human race. They would not interfere because humans must be allowed to evolve on their own. Such person is Nancy Leader, who has spoken of several prophecies of impending destruction of the earth because of the shifting of the tectonic plates. Fortunately, not a single prophecy has come true. But Nancy maintains that she is in contact with these nurturing aliens and the prophecies are true. Only their timing may be a little off. Nancy seems to believe in what she says, and there is no evidence that she makes any money out of espousing her beliefs. Betty Hale recalled a map that the aliens had shown her, and she was able to reproduce it on paper. Experts handling her case were able to match the star of the aliens' home, the Zeta Reticuli. She also drew certain other stars, the existence of which were confirmed much later using a powerful telescope. It is difficult to come to a firm conclusion about the existence of nature of grey aliens, but as Shakespeare wrote, "When these prodigies do so conjointly meet, let not men say, these are their reasons." There are simply too many independent sightings and witness accounts that speak of similar encounters, not to mention the numerous and questionable cover-ups by the government. It may not be wise to be dismissive of grey alien presence amidst us, or believe that humans are the only intelligent species the universe ever cared to create. Grey aliens and the harvesting of souls. A look up at the blue of the sky any day on our planet will fill most people with a sense of reassurance and warmth. Yes, the clouds roll in and the storms will come. The idol can change in seconds into something mass of dark threat in a moment that can sweep away towns and lives in a relatively few moments. But whatever you see up there pales into insignificance against silent geometric forms, nothing to do with the rain that suddenly appears seemingly from nowhere and disappear equally quickly. Discs, cylinders, triangles, and orbs of light, some as large as cities, dangle and dance hither and thither, moving at thousands of miles an hour, pouring questions out in the mind's eye of human witness. There are records of thousands of them now over the millennia, written on walls and stone pieces of papyrus, paper, plaster, celluloid, magnetic tape, and metallic discs. They have been out there to see by intention and accident, with no one in final authority to explain them or to define their veracity. Trouble with solving the enigma of the UFO phenomenon is that, in consensus, it tends to be seen on the level of the tooth fairy and their hobbit, and thus defies the terms of the serious mental uptake for human reconnaissance. That one fact is of bigger significance than anything else. Unfortunately, a look at blogs discussing UFO verity on the internet will soon make it plain that the world is full of more crackpots and mental defectives than it ought to be, certainly more than the subject deserves. For it, UFOs are really craft in which extraterrestrial alien entities prevail over us and other human environment. We as humanity have before us something so fabulously significant that absolutely nothing takes precedence over it in importance. The mere speculations that there might be some truth to the proposition of the extraterrestrial alien power in the affairs of humankind poses an interesting socio-philosophical question. Could conquering aliens be any more cruel to humankind than humankind has been to its own? Could they be able to operate on the axiom that we have operated on as Homo sapiens in relation to all other less intelligent animal species on the planet, in dominating and assuming these species for our purposes so ruthlessly and cruelly whenever it suits us, under the aegis of the second law of thermodynamics, or entropy, that makes sure everything atomic breaks down, rots into greater and greater states of chaos and randomness with the time, but never goes the other way. It is natural to think this way in a universe of diminishing return. It will be the most natural and logical way that any superior entity can be expected to treat any subordinate one here or anywhere in the universe. It is a song of ultimate and essential expediency, a way to maintain a physical existence for as long as possible against any and all natural threats. In contend that if there was such a presence, it will never be tangibly proven if the alien visitors choose not to reveal themselves. If their survival depends on preserving the enigma, whatever they are real or imaginary, you would expect them to use the supreme technology that is reportedly at their disposal to put in place the most foolproof methodologies to prevent discovery. Nevertheless, in a universe where entropy holds sway with its vagaries and destructive power, the accidents and the chaotic disbursement that it provides has, I believe, incidentally revealed the presence of such entities here on Earth from time to time, without a shadow of a doubt. To all but the most intransigent skeptical minds, for them nothing will suffice as proof that they are here. If grey alien entities exist in terms of our physical reality, who or what are they and how did they come to be here? Most importantly, why are they here? To get these answers from entities who are quite clearly hiding from us and quite plainly don't want to be discovered, it is not possible, and so one has to look at what they actually do to us for clues that might give us answers to the questions I pose. Apart from moving across the skies at phenomenal speeds in various shaped crafts, at far greater speeds than us locals can manage, they abduct and perform the most heinous surgical procedures on humanity and some animal species in a deeply covered guise. These procedures mostly center on reproductive features and capacities. It is my conclusion that their work here is not simply that of neutral observation, but is aimed at an utilitarian purpose to their advantage and not ours. They are and have been farming us for millennia and are covertly genetically changing us to suit their purposes. To understand those purposes, we must first look into both our origins and theirs. The evolution, entropy, and the Godverse. There is evidence to suggest that the devolution rather than evolution may well be the overall direction for living species. Scientists studying mutational phenomenon have discovered that there is a blueprint, an ancestral body plan, that guides development from our species from another. Instead of inventing a new set of body plan genes for each new type of animal, it seems that natural selection has simply tinkered with an old one, a set known as Hox genes. If all organisms that now exist had from their very inception into the evolutionary process a blueprint of how they should evolve, then where did that blueprint come from in the first place? How did the first multicellular animal, evolving some 700 million years ago, contain the basic template of information that only needed to be shuffled around in order to form a human being? All the myriad changing environmental factors and changes in mutation which allowed survival within changed environments and thus evolution through the survival of the fittest had not yet occurred at that point. Where did the most basic of living organisms, or indeed the chemical soup that produced them in the first place, get this genetic blueprint? Therein lays evidence of states of prior order devolving into states of lesser order. Cosmologists say that the universe came from a point of origin smaller than an atom. A titanic explosion called the Big Bang brought it all into being from a prior state of coherence and order. No one knows what this state really was, but it presumed all the laws governing all universal monuments and disbursement, and left us with puzzle that to this day confuse and perplex some of the best minds in our world. One thing is certain, the laws of physics that came with it all provide the scope for giant contradictions. If all was together in a point smaller than an atom before the Big Bang, then this togetherness is now being destroyed by the increasing inertia of the explosion and the products of the explosions. You, me, the Greys, and Uncle Tom Cobley, and all are being systematically taken apart apart by a law called the second law of thermodynamics, in an increasing and accelerating separation of the parts of the universe in a melee of chaotic and random disbursement with time. The universe is breaking down all of the capacity that exists in it for self-motivation, realization, reason and refurbishment. Why bring about the capacity to understand the universe way down the road after the birth and then destroy this very capacity for reason and self-monitoring in a complete cold nothingness? To view it this way is the plain perversity of the mad. However, as the universe can be traced from the point of coherence and order, we may find in those regions a less nonsensical explanation. Let me run a scenario by you. Imagine two basic opposed existential poles between which all things that exist are arrayed. These poles define absolutes. Let's call one pole the pole of all-togetherness and absolute harmony and the other the pole of absolute chaos and disharmony. The poles are implicit. They are just the basic opposing extreme that things can go to. They are abstractions for providing potential for things to happen. All things unite in perfect coherence at the pole of harmony, and the opposite happens at the pole of chaos. So the underlying monument provided by the pole of harmony is the union of all parts as a timeless, forceless, and eternal function, and the underlying momentum at the pole of chaos is the separation of all parts as the most temporal, forceful, and brief function possible. The interesting place will be the absolute center of the interference between these two contrasts. We would expect the maximum potential difference point here. In my model, it will be the point that generates the consequences of the meeting of two absolutes. A Big Bang, for instance, it could be expected to generate a stream of them continually. Let's say, such as this underlies the whole existential scale, and the Big Bang that generated our universe came from such an overall modality. It came as an incidental offshoot of all these logical factors and was a natural implicit expression of them. Our universe will then be an amalgam of both momentums in the chaotic amelioration that would follow the mixing of two opposed contrasts. I have called the pole of harmony the Godverse, thus defining it as an implicit expression of being outside the simplistic and absolute dominion of a Big Daddy anthropocentric God figure and his supposed hand in all our temporal and finite individual living paradigm. The discoveries of science show us today how facile this religious incentive is. Coming to terms with another life form or existent mode outside our own human living form brings us face to face with a huge conundrum about gods with personas. So with the concept of Godverse in mind, let's now return to an understanding of the grey alien phenomenon itself and what that might be. The grey alien species. From most descriptions and accounts, there seem to be two types of grey alien entity, a tall variety that seems to be in command and an almost identical shorter variety. I believe the tall ones were once upon a time a natural functional presentation of the universe as any other living species might be, whilst the short ones are, I believe, machines that they have manufactured in their likeness. My take on the tall greys is that they come from planets whose civilization is at last stage, where primary highly intelligent naturally living entities become something catastrophically different, artificial fully functional robots. In other words, these civilizations have got to the point where the second law of thermodynamics and its corrosive effect profoundly changed these highest natural life forms that they gradually devolved into a machine-type being, the tall greys. This would happen when constant revamping of the natural biological edges of the living form is intercepted with a continual supplement of implanted devices, such that the species is naturally no more. The entity has become a synthetic super SIM card being, so to speak. I am convinced that the tall grey is a super SIM card entity still bearing the last dispositions of its version of DNA-based life. It converted itself into a SIM card cyborg long ago. From all the reports and evidence available on captured greys, I believe the taller grey aliens now have no vestige of their original connection to the Godverse. They are now almost total artificial beings, their bioprocess running on soft tissue diodes and transistors. They have no sense of self, but their intelligence and motivation come from a supplemental artificial quantum analytical compound synthesis program devoid of biological sensory input. I believe that the greys are a salutary lesson of what might well happen to humanity in the future if we disregard the possibility that we might have an eternal connection to a natural eternal state of existence beyond atoms. We as human beings are just beginning the run thanks to the deadly inertias of science and technology. We stand catastrophically on the threshold of the same destiny here on this planet. The tall grey aliens who have simcast themselves, so to speak, into a roboidal state, their previous natural one, now interface well with the mechanically manufactured smaller version made in their image and likeness. The smaller version is an entirely artificial, highly sophisticated machine robot manufactured by the tall greys and made in a mercury mulch on a scaffolding of fine gold wires. Designed with a body mass able to survive the huge sudden inertial changes of force necessary for traveling the vast distances of space. The ideal form of survival, the phenomenal deceleration needed to travel beyond light speed and slow down to the gravitational dictates of planetary orbit and landing. Why do they need to travel beyond their own planet, and what might this mean existentially to us natural living human beings? If each naturally living individual entity has a personal line of connection tracing back to its origin in the Godverse, therein might lay the answer. This line of connection is what I call a soul. It is inherently nothing religious. This ancestral line holds the fully depository of knowledge, or every single detail of everything and every experience an individual has been through. It holds it as a pattern of forcelessness deployed on a tray of force. In this way, a field grid is created that is everlasting and logs the uniqueness of experiences that hallmarks the individuality of any living thing. The pathway the line takes back to the Godverse depends upon the free choices made by an individual. It runs, I believe, through many lifetimes via the mechanism of the transmigration of implicit states one to the other. We call this the cycle of incarnation or reincarnation, a principle accepted by Hindus and Buddhists, and incidentally once accepted by the mystical sides of the Judeo-Christian and Muslim faiths. Parasites and soul eaters. The tall greys are completely artificial intelligence now in their SIM cards, because they are almost purely atomic. I do suspect they do have a smattering of DNA and thus a record of their former selves, but not enough to reproduce naturally and have a soul line of connection to the Godverse. They do, however, have a background sense of what they once were through this, but they are unable to bridge into the chrysalis or centermost point of the Godverse, Godhead. They are struck forever in an enforced universe of parts. Their immortality has to be an artificially mechanically produced one. They may well be seeking an alternative, the one that gives our naturally living humanity the possibility of existing on an eternal scale beyond the atom. They may well be seeking to piggyback, so to speak, on our individual lines of connection to the Godverse. In other words, they may be trying to steal our souls, to append us to them without our knowledge. It might well explain why they don't seem to want us to know they are here. After all, if they were a benevolent and altruistic, goodly kind, why would they not declare their presence here openly and lead us to a glorious future of beneficence and happiness? Why do they hide from us? I believe they are parasitizing us and other suitable species universe-wide, and the short greys and their craft were created as a means to this end. What then can explain the remarkable capacities of their craft to morph, change direction and travel at speeds faster than light? I believe the answer lies in an understanding of gravity whose poorly understood nature is highlighted in the following extract from an article entitled Gravity Mysteries. Why is gravity fine-tuned? If the expansion of the space had overwhelmed the pull of gravity in the newborn universe, stars, galaxies, and humans would never have been able to form. If on the other hand gravity had been much stronger, stars and galaxies might have formed, but they would have quickly collapsed in on themselves and each other. Our cosmic history could have been over by now. Only the middle ground, where the expansion and gravitational strength balance to within 1 part in 1015 at 1 second after the Big Bang, allows life to form. That is down to the size of the gravitational constant g. We can make measurements and determine its size, but we have no idea where this value comes from, says John Barrow at the University of Cambridge. We have never explained any basic constant of nature. Could this remarkable fine-tuning of gravitational strength be a clue that the strength of gravity may be an exact reflection of the force of the universe pulling against the forcelessness of the Godverse? Could it be an expression of the default situation that brings all things back into Godhead, an underlying tacit resistance, rather like the spring-back tension in elastic that is held still at one point and pull at the other? The immense amount of gravity in a black hole is comparable to the tension in elastic that has been stretched out as far as it can go. Elastic can only be pulled so far, before it unavoidably springs back. Thus, it ultimately dominated by the stale point to which it is tied. This is an analogy of the dominance of the Godverse over the universe, where Godhead is the stale point. Thus, gravity is the antidote to the second law of thermodynamics that drives the universe into pass through a web of chaotic disbursement with time. Gravity may also be seen as an ordering momentum created by the infinite potential of the Godverse reaching into all finite states. It creates an ever-changing clone of the Godverse at various stages of expression, copying the signature of order onto the paper of all the various stages of chaos. The Gnostic text Pistis Sophia includes an incredibly intricate and lengthy description of all the stages by which the non-physical translated into the physical. A myriad of levels between heaven and earth are described, leading eventually to an account of how each body part was formed from the insubstantial counterpart. We as living entities have become trapped in the stages of gravitational tension, a tension that stretches from the Big Bang. This entrapment happens because we have taken into ourselves and our original nature through the edges of will the manifested components of that gravitational tension, which might be described in another way as atoms, mass, and materiality. I believe that gravity, the pull back to the Godverse created by the potential difference of the presence of the Godverse in the universe, is the rays momentum and inertial moment. It provides their mechanism of changing location. I believe that their craft run on the force of the spring back of the elastic, so to speak. They are running in a kind of parallel state to us, and perhaps the meeting point between the two states could be what cosmologists commonly call a wormhole. The direction of the gravitational momentum pulling things together could be said to be the highway towards the Godverse, but the expression of the momentum of the universe as it separates parts through the second law of thermodynamics is one of force away from the Godverse. They are spiritually more primitive than us in the terms of intrinsic and force state, but their direction of travel is towards the Godverse. This paradox might define the nature of the tracks along which UFOs travel. Thus, they are doubling back on us, following the twisted, toroidal shape of the universe that I explain in my books. Physicists have affirmed this universal shape since I first suggested it in 1998. It has been reported that the various craft the Greys move through the space-time run to anti-gravity devices as they are traveling in an existential modality or reality that is set in the opposite direction to us. Their gravity becomes anti-gravity in our reality frame. Their ability to levitate abductees is a property of this phenomenon of anti-gravity. Their craft appear to change shape and direction dramatically because they are traveling on anti-gravitational forces that they marry into our various pro-gravitational and non-gravitational forces such as magnetic fields. These magnetic forces change all the time. Could the struggle to cope with these constant changes in the force of paradigms that they have to face in our reality explain why their craft sometimes crash? Gravity is a constant, even force. Electromagnetic fields are not. The mixture of the two, in so many myriad ways, in any given physical universal place may be a big problem for them when they are in the locality of planets and solar systems and not in the deep space, where smooth, non-variant travel perceptives prevail. Perhaps that is why they sometimes run out of control. There has been a long-standing debate in ufology between the extraterrestrial hypothesis and the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis. The latter views them as beings from another dimensional state, and the former as beings from another actual location within our own dimensional state, beings from another planet. I believe both of these hypotheses may well be true. They do exist in another frame of tension that exists parallel to our own state, but they can pass from their state to ours and become physically trapped, caught in our reality. Timothy Good and other respected and reliable sources suggest that there are underground bases all over the earth containing these craft and occupants that are caught there. They have been seen behind the moon or near Mars. I believe that these crafts are actual physical mechanisms for conveyance in our space-time created for the short utilitarian Greys who actually pilot them. Hybridization for immortality. As I discussed before, we seem to be inexorably moving towards the creation of the sim god man, attempting to create for ourselves a permanent home in the physical universe by bridging our human biologies that are vulnerable to break down and decay into harder wearing artificial modus operandi. At the same time, we seek to replace the delicate reality of human sentiment and imagination with a hardcore virtual reality substitute. I believe any previous civilizations on this planet, such as perhaps Atlantis, Lemuria, or ancient India at the time of the Vimana, may have reached the same threshold and inadvertently allowed in the Greys to help covered their species into a physical immortal race through a hybridization program similar to that described by so many abductees today. However, there is of course a huge paradox between the words physical and immortal. The two are incompatible owing to the second law of thermodynamics. The very power that makes for immortality a sole line of connection to the Godverse is compromised and lessened when it is mixed in with artificial elements. Thus the Greys are doomed to failure, hence the very sickly looking hybrid babies that are often seen on their craft. After these ancient civilizations were destroyed, the Greys may well have been caught here looking for new sources of DNA. They may then have started a program of genetic interpretation that helped or mold our species into its current form. What is happening to humankind with the imminent emergence of SIM-card man may then be a catastrophically chilling prospect for all of us. In allowing ourselves to be chained like this, we will be ensuring the loss of our natural eternal scope in exchange for an artificially induced one that allows immortality that has to always progress in temporary stages. This is an immortality that will need constant technological refurbishment because of the relentless and continual action of the second law laying waste to each prior stage. There is much speculation about the different types of alien species that are witnessed. I believe these varieties, be they reptilians, insectoid or amphibious, are products of their contact with other species on planet like ours. These are hybrids that they have made which inevitably broke down to express the devolved animal form of the original species. The Nordic aliens are, I believe, the culmination of the current hybridization project they are conducting with us. Chillingly, Hitler was shown one of these in an alien encounter and told that this was the new man. The biggest irony is the Greys do not realize that they cannot with physical means get a handle on something that's not physical like the soul, simply because they only understand the physical. So the tragedy lies in the damage they do in trying to reach what they cannot reach, converting us via abduction and genetic manipulation to be more like them, making us, in other words, more like machines, all in the vain hope that they can make an amalgam that will be, in their terms, the best of both worlds, borrowing the eternality of the Godverse and infusing it into the temporality of the universe in an attempt to create a state of physical immorality. The Greys can only abide within the atomic realm with the loss of their original attachment to the eternal existential properties beyond atoms in the pole of harmony. They can go no further as they are purely physical creations now. They cannot die in the sense we do and thus naturally reach the gate to the Godverse through the center points of the space between atoms. With the same drive for physical immortality that drives the technological vanguard of our species now on our planet, they seek for their information, their program to continue. They seek to recreate the biologically natural being they once were, manipulating our genetic prospectus to reflect their own original pro forma. That way they retain their intellectual superiority and their connection with the potential eternal prospectus of existence, albeit on a hijacked soul or connecting line. But, and this is the rub, they will never be able to do it. The soul field is a unique fingerprint. Entry to the Godverse is only marked for the original natural owner because every bit of information on it is framed with the original experience and only the original bearer can know the experience that brought it out of the Godverse. An add-on can never be aware of that experience and follow the track back. It would be a wasted effort, but the Greys can never know it as such from their point of view, as they have lost their own individual track and have artificial SIM cards entities. The battle lines of existentiality between the artificial and natural were drawn billions of years ago with the Big Bang. We sit on its contemporary stance right now. What is natural is programmed for ultimate eternal endurance. It is up to us as the pinnacle species of natural endeavor here in our neck of the woods in space-time to see the truth of it and make the choices that maintain this stance. The prospect of being SIM card man beckons us all. The Greys are its vanguard and its alma mater. Will we as a species elect to sing their song and not ours, thereby losing forever the essence of the potential magnificence we truly are?